It's on my teeth. Ghost walking a Prius. We made that for Burning Man, that big Ferris wheel. So that's a little wheelchair he's designed that runs on an electrode stuck to your head, so you can be a quad and drive it around. Anyway, you get the idea. Anyway, so that's my brother. So what do you guys want to talk about? Should I just talk about how much fun it is to be an innovator, or tell you what I've done, or what? Either, both? All right, well, so I'm a heart surgeon, is my job. And do you know what you have to do to become a heart surgeon?
A lot of school.
Yeah, so after high school, you do 4 years of college, then 4 years of medical school, then 5 years of general surgery training, then 3 years of heart surgery training. So when I finished high school, I had 16 more years to go. It goes by really fast, and you know how you guys are working on your projects and having fun and enjoying it? That's what it is the whole time. You're doing cool stuff. You're either learning to be a doctor, or you're actually doing it while somebody's watching, making sure the whole time you're training, those 8 years I was training to be a heart surgeon, you're doing surgery every day, taking care of patients. It's actually sort of like a wonderful period in your life where there's always someone there to go whoop whoop right before you mess up, or to fix your mistakes. So it's, you know, it's not bad, it's not bad. And you get paid the whole time too. But anyway, so I became a heart surgeon, but I think I was like, more like you guys than I was like most heart surgeons. I love making stuff. My garage looks just like that table, with Arduinos all over the place, and makes, and computers I've taken apart that are hooked up to different things, and linear servos and force feedback. And I just bought a really nice 3D printer, Objet 30. I've got a mill and a lathe at the house, and drill presses and everything, and CNC. So I'm really into that stuff, and I always have been. So once I came out and became a heart surgeon, it was kind of like, well, the first couple of years I spent just focusing on heart surgery and trying to be able to get patients through and have them do well and establish a practice. And I was up at Harvard. I was a faculty at Harvard Medical School. I trained here in Houston with Michael DeBakey. You all heard of Michael DeBakey? Well, I was with him for that whole period. So I was his last chief resident. He stepped down as chancellor when I graduated. And then I went up to Harvard Medical School and started working. And after 2 or 3 years, I thought, I think I got this. I think I understand the heart surgery thing. Now how to innovate. And I'd always admired Dr. DeBakey, because Dr. DeBakey, you know, he was a famous heart surgeon. He was also a really big innovator. And there's a famous picture of him that I have framed in my office of him sitting down at his wife's sewing machine. And I'm pushing my foot because it didn't even have a motor. It was a hand-pedaled sewing machine. And he took a sheet of Dacron polyester, you know, that he bought at the fabric store, and he rolled it into a tube, and then on the sewing machine ran a little stitch line down it to turn it permanently into a tube. And the reason he did that is he was trying to replace the biggest blood vessel in the body. Does anybody know what that's called? The aorta? You ever heard that? The aorta? Anyway, it's a blood vessel about as big around as a garden hose. And in a lot of patients, it starts to stretch out and swells, and if it pops, you die instantly. Albert Einstein died of that. So it's a very big deal, and there are hundreds of thousands of patients that have that every year. Roll back to the 1950s. If you had that, there's not a lot you can do for it. I mean, some people would say, well, let's try to take it out, and we'll put in the aorta out of this dead guy. We'll take a dead guy's aorta and try to sew it in. Very few people survive that operation. There are only a handful of people that would even do it. But everybody said, man, wouldn't it be great if we had an artificial tube that we could replace it with? Well, in 1950, you had cotton, linen, silk, wool. You had fabrics made out of biologics, and the body dissolved all of them. So if you put it in, the body would eat it, and it would fall apart, and you'd explode and die. But then, in World War II, they invented plastic, right? Bakelite, and then the first plastic was nylon. And so they had sheets of nylon. And Dr. DeBakey and 2 or 3 other heart surgeons in the world said, this is what we've been waiting for. If we make a tube out of nylon fabric and sew it, we can replace the aorta. So they all ran out to their local fabric stores and said, I want a sheet of nylon, and took them home and started doing experiments in their animal labs in cows. Well, Dr. DeBakey went to a store that used to be downtown Houston called Foley's. It's not there anymore. But he went to Foley's, and he was a short, really mean guy. I mean, you hear all these great things about Dr. DeBakey, but boy, he was just a tough guy. He'd hit you in the chest and say, this thing is stupid and you just don't care. You know, tough. And he goes in the fabric store and says, you know, Dale, I need a sheet of nylon. And they explained to him that they were out of nylon. And so I'm sure he was cussing and walking out of the store. And one of them said, but Dr. DeBakey, we just got this brand new fabric. It's called Dacron polyester. It's similar, it's a synthetic. And he looked at it and ran his fingers over and said, all right, I'll try that. Well, it turned out nylon didn't work. The body ate nylon. The only thing that worked was Dacron polyester. And Dr. DeBakey became the father of the vascular graft. And that made hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars. It was a big, big invention. And he invented it. So what did I learn from that story? I learned, first of all, that's what innovators and entrepreneurs do. A lot of people sit and think, I bet you can replace it with a fabric tube. I bet if you just sewed it on a sewing machine. But the innovator actually goes and gets the stuff and sews it and does experiment. And I can tell that you guys are innovators and entrepreneurs by looking around that bench and all the projects. You guys have figured out the components, you've ordered them, you've assembled them, you've put them together, you've tested them. That's the whole entrepreneurial process, is doing that on a scale that's going to change the world. Okay? That's one thing I learned. The second thing I learned from that is how little you have to step out of the box to be in a whole new territory. You guys know nothing about heart surgery. If I told you, look, this is the blood vessel that we need to replace. Here's all the stuff that exists in the world. How many of you would say, I know, we'll carve it out of wood, or we'll make it out of plaster of Paris? None of you would. You'd all say, take fabric, roll it up into a tube, and and replace it, right? Right? He actually did it though. So you don't have to be super brilliant or come up with this eureka creativity. You just have to think about it and do something that hadn't been done before that's going to be impactful and make a difference. So anyway, I went out and worked really hard. I'd always admired Dr. DeBakey and a couple guys like that were real innovators, and realized that by inventing something as simple as a tube made of cloth, you can not only change the world, save tons of lives, you can change your world. It gives you something to dump your passion into that you can see grow and become a thing that lasts forever. But it can also change your economic trajectory, and it's a big deal to invent a product. So I'd been a heart surgeon for 2 or 3 years, and I was starting to feel comfortable, and I said, all right, time to start innovating. There's this operation called coronary artery bypass, okay? Your heart sits here in your chest doing this 100,000 times a day, 35 million times a year. Hopefully it's doing that in all of your chests right now. Raise your hand if your heart's not beating. Okay, good. On the surface of the heart, you ever seen pictures of the heart, those squiggly little lines?
Yeah.
Those are the arteries that bring blood supply to that muscle that's doing all that work. It's working really hard. And tons of blood is going down those arteries, so the heart can keep doing this to pump blood out through the arteries to the rest of your body. Those arteries can become blocked off. Why do those arteries get blocked off? Does anybody know? What? Because you eat a lot of junk. That's right. What else?
Smoking.
Smoking. What's the biggest thing that people do to make their arteries block off? They pick the wrong parents. It's genetics, a big part of it. So if your mom and dad have the genes for it and you inherit them, then you better not smoke and you better not eat a lot of junk. So it's genetics, smoking, diabetes. Anyway, when those arteries get blocked, we have to fix it. And one of the ways we fix it is construct new plumbing on the surface of the heart. We'll take a vein out of the leg. There's an extra vein there that we can take out. Our arteries from the back of the breastbone, and construct plumbing to get blood into those little arteries beyond the blockage. And the way we did that for years and years and years is we put you on the heart-lung machine. The heart-lung machine is about the size of this desk, has 2 really smart people working in it. It's got a bunch of pumps hooked up to the patient with tubes. So all the patient's blood drains from the patient into this machine, and this machine very quickly filters it. It takes the carbon dioxide out of the blood, adds oxygen so the blood becomes bright red, chills it, and pumps it back to the patient so that there's still blood circulating to the patient. So it becomes the heart and the lungs of the patient. So you can stop the heart and lungs in the body, and it'll keep the rest of the patient alive. So we would do that. We would put them on this big machine. We would stop their heart and pack it nice. If we don't pack it nice, it starts to die when it doesn't have blood, because we put a clamp on it. So the whole body gets bright red blood except the heart. If the heart gets bright red blood, it starts beating, but it's hard to work on a beating heart. So we clamp it so it's not getting blood. Use the big desk-like machine so the rest of the body gets bright red blood, and then very quickly do those bypasses. But it's stressful being on this machine, and there are complications associated with it. So I'd heard that there were some guys that were bypassing it while the heart was still beating, and they weren't using the machine, and they weren't stopping the heart. And I went and watched one of them, and the guy at Johns Hopkins Hospital had this little thing that had 2 prongs on it, almost like a barbecue fork that was bent. And his assistant mashed down on the surface of the heart, trying to hold it still while he worked on it. And I said, man, that is the hardest thing I've ever seen. But like Dr. DeBakey, I said, well, it seems like we could make something that would hold it still and more motionless with suction or something else. So I went to Home Depot, went to the grocery store, I bought some spoons and ladles, I cut them up with my little Dremel. I didn't have a machine shop then. I started experimenting down in the animal lab at the Beth Israel Deaconess, the hospital in Boston, where I worked while I was at Harvard, and got something that worked pretty well. And I made it myself. I spent 20 or 30 bucks, probably about the same amount you spend on all your projects, and got it working really well, and demonstrated for some guys from industry, and they bought it, and I made tens of millions of dollars off of it. It's used in several 100,000 operations. That's the innovative process, and that got me started. And subsequent to that, I think I have 140 patents now. I've got 4 or 5 venture-backed companies that are going simultaneously, and that is my passion, is coming up with an idea, going to Home Depot or the hobby store, or now getting online and going to Small Parts, ordering all this stuff, kludging it together like you did that generator or like you did your time-lapse camera, doing experiments enough until I'm convinced that even if it doesn't work, that it is something that can be made to work. Finding people who are smarter than me, generally really gifted engineers who are passionate and hardworking. They work with me, we keep evolving it until it looks good enough. We go hand in hand to the venture capital world and say, this is what we've got. We've got this great idea, we filed a patent, here's our prototype, here's what works, here's the 400,000 patients in the United States that can benefit from this. We think the work we've done is worth $3 million. We want to get to this step though, we need $3 million cash. So you give us $3 million cash, the company will be half yours and half ours, and let's see what we can do. And that's the venture capital model of entrepreneurship, and it's my favorite thing to do. And some of you guys in 5 or 10 years are going to be those engineers that are going to help somebody make something that they can't quite conceive, because you'll have the basic knowledge and experience with Arduinos or whatever, solar cells or whatever you're working on, to help that become a reality, help others see it so that they'll fund it and turn it into real concerns. And that's the entrepreneurial path of innovation and development. What do you think of that? Questions? Yeah.
What got you interested in working in heart surgery?
Growing up here in Houston, Texas. So, you guys don't know this, but in 1960, I was born in 1960, now it seems like a long, long time ago, there was no heart surgery. Nobody had ever had a heart operation on planet Earth. Maybe a handful of people had tried to do some crazy stuff, but it hadn't existed yet. And then Michael DeBakey was one of the first heart surgeons. Michael DeBakey, you know, famous heart surgeon, he did his first heart operation at age 53. There was no heart surgery before that. But what does gas do when you release it into a vacuum? It fills the whole vacuum, right? There were no heart surgeons. He got to grow to incredible prominence because he was one of the only ones. There were 4 or 5 heart surgeons in the United States. Denton Cooley, who trained at Johns Hopkins, came down and became Michael DeBakey's partner. Have you all heard of Denton Cooley? Anyway, he's my boss now. He's 93. Anyway, but so as heart surgery started to emerge, because Denton Cooley and Michael DeBakey were both in Houston, Houston became one of the hottest hubs for heart surgery on planet Earth. And people came to Houston from all over the world to watch these guys operate. And people say that, oh, from all over the world. I mean, there was no heart surgeon on planet Earth that didn't come to Houston to learn how to do it in those early days. The Texas Medical Center. Have any of you ever been to the Texas Medical Center? How many of you know that that's the largest medical center on planet Earth? It is. And you can argue, people do argue, about what's the second largest. And some people argue about what's the third largest. But you can pick any other 2 medical centers on planet Earth and combine them, and they're still not as big as the Texas Medical Center. It is that dominant. And the force that largely grew it was heart surgery, because it was one of the only places in the world that was doing it, and it was doing the largest volume of it, and the most number of first things that hadn't been done before. They'd figure out how to do them, and it was just a magnet for the community. So growing up, when I was younger than you guys, when I was 8, 10, 12, going to Memorial Drive Elementary School, my mom would cut newspaper articles out of the Houston Chronicle. We had 2 newspapers, the Houston Chronicle and the Houston Post. And the front page was often about heart surgery. And she would put it by my breakfast bowl as I was eating my Lucky Charms, and I'll read about these total rock stars doing this amazing stuff. And so when I was in junior high and high school, and there'd be a science project or something, my posters were all about the artificial heart, or about assist pumps to assist the failing heart, or about different things like that. And I should say that's one of my main projects now. I have all these projects that are companies that are developing technology to help patients, or we raise lots of money and hire employees and develop it, do clinical trials. But one thing that I'm doing that is not a company is developing the first continuous flow, pulseless artificial heart. I'm going to show you a movie about that, can I? No, I've some time still?
Sure.
Who's in charge here? Anybody? Nobody? You are? Sort of? Let's see, how do I get this to not be so? Oh, I apologize.
He said, he's going for it.
So sad.
This is 7 minutes long, but it's really cool. Here, hit the lights again. There.
Oh.
Every new technology goes through a phase where we don't know enough about how to implement it, when to implement it. That's me. That's where we are with this device. That's me. You can breathe in 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Ooh.
How dare we open people up and cut so hard? Who do we think we are? But somebody's got to do it. Heart failure accounts for 300,000 to 400,000 deaths every year in the United States. But if we had something on a shelf in a box that we could take off and sew in as a replacement for disease heart, then anybody could get one when they need it. That'll be one of the biggest advances in modern medicine in the last 100 years. And so that's what Frazier and I are trying to do. Everybody in cardiac surgery knows who Bud Frazier is. But he's been involved in this field from the onset. Incredibly innovative. Brilliant surgeon, brilliant scientist. But anyway, the new glasses and what you should do. Frazier came up with the absolute pure distilled essence of Eureka. He said, cut out the whole heart and replace it with 2 turbines.
I remember as a medical student massaging the heart of a young boy. I thought then, if I had this young boy alive, we could make him pump. It would keep him alive.
Because of the mechanism that pumps like these use to propel the blood, a rapidly spinning rotor, the flow is continuous like in a garden hose. There's no heartbeat. And that's physiology that hasn't been seen in the last 500 million years of evolution. Here's my dog. See him in here? The garage in my house, I've turned into a shop. So I set up a little station there, out of things that were available from Home Depot. So there's Dacron polyester, just like the baby use. Together a balsa tissue airplane. There's bath and tile caulk, drywall tape from Home Depot. We would cut out the entire heart. We insert the inflows of the pumps. Those are 2 turbines. Amazingly, the next day, these animals wake up. They pee, they poop. And yet, if you listen to their chest with a stethoscope, you hear nothing. They have no heartbeat, no EKG, all the criteria that we
No pulse.
conventionally use to analyze patients. They're dead. We did this in over 50 cows before we even contemplated doing it in a human being. But in March of this year, we encountered a gravely ill patient named Craig Lewis.
In this patient's case, he had a disease called amyloidosis, which is a mortal illness.
In amyloidosis, you have a rogue population of cells in your bone marrow that are cranking out protein that your body has no use for. And this amyloid material built up in his heart to the extent that his heart had failed. He was going to die in the next 12 to 24 hours. But this was his only shot.
And hold the breathing.
His heart was just all a solid scar. So that's a project that we're working on now and committed tons of time and energy and resources to. The device that you saw in that movie is now completely obsolete. Our new device only has one moving part. It doesn't have any bearings. Everything's magnetically levitated, so there's no mechanical wear. We're still at the calf stage. Hopefully in the next year or two, we'll put one in a human. That particular device was featured in the write-up in the National Geographic magazine, and there was a full-page photo of it, and that appeared on the cover of Popular Science. The whole cover was a big picture of that device. There was an article about what we're doing. So anyway, I describe that to illustrate how fulfilling and exciting and fun a lifetime of innovation and entrepreneurship can be. And for you guys to already be focused on that at this early age, I have no doubt that there are going to be several total powerhouses of innovation that are in this room right now. Any other questions? Yeah.
It came on TV. I think I saw
It
this.
may have been on, I think it's been on TV a couple times. And I know they show it on the airlines, they show short movies, I get emails all the time about people that have seen it and stuff. And it's awful, it's really blown open the lecture circuit. Everybody wants you to come and talk about it at their place. That's been fun. Now, I had a TV show. Did you see Miracle Workers? It was probably you guys are too young. It was 2007. It was a primetime ABC show about two doctors that would find patients with incurable diseases or things and take them to the centers where they were doing the cutting edge stuff. I was one of the hosts of that show. That was kind of wasted 6 months, but you can see myself on TV. Also, People Magazine. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you die with an artificial heart?
Yeah, that's right. So he died because we all decided, that's it, we turned it off. Because he had this amyloid stuff that had built up in his heart, that made his heart not work. It also built up in his liver and kidneys, and later we found out in his lungs. And you can't do a kidney, heart, liver, lung transplant. No one's ever done anything like that. But we thought if we could keep him well perfused and healthy enough, that perhaps we could poison his bone marrow, turn around the amyloid, and then maybe transplant him in a year or two. His liver, though, continued to fail. What's the liver do? Does anybody know? What? Yeah, it cleans out the blood, cleans toxins out of the blood. His liver wasn't working. The toxins, just over 5.5 weeks, got higher and higher and higher, so that he was really sleepy, and then finally was unconscious, and we couldn't get him to wake up. And the family said, "How are we going to get him to wake up?" And we said, "Well, we don't think we can." They said, "Well, he wouldn't want this lying in bed, you know. I mean, even though blood circulating is alive, if he's not awake, what's the point of it?" We had a big meeting, and they asked us to turn the device off. If we put that in somebody healthy, you know, somebody who maybe had unresectable, meaning it had spread too wide, cancer of their heart, and we had to cut the heart out and replace it with that, I'm sure it would work forever. But like I said, that's yesterday's news. We now have a device that's smaller and cooler and has only one moving part. That had 2 turbines, 2 little Archimedes screws. You know what an Archimedes screw is? It was sort of like a jet ski propeller. It had 2 of those spinning on axles. And you know what made them spin? Exactly what you made back there. 3 coils of wire, a neodymium iron boron magnet with fins on it, and the coils were actuated with sine waves that were precessed, they were advanced, and the magnet would rotate to stay with it. That's how it's a brushless DC motor that pumps blood, just like you've made on your bench top there. The generator is a brushless DC motor or a generator, same thing. And the people that made it started off making something just like that, and made it more complex and more complex, working together with a bunch of smart people that produce these life-changing technologies. Yeah.
I remember something small of what you said. You said it works through electromagnet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that work?
Okay, so imagine the face of a clock. There are no clocks with hands anymore, are there? Picture one in your head.
Yeah.
And there's a magnetic coil, magnetic field that's focused at noon, and one at 4:30, and one at 7:30. So 120 degrees apart, equilateral triangle, okay? In the center is a magnet, just like you've got there, okay? If we energize this magnetic coil, it makes a strong magnetic field, and the magnet rotates to line up with that one. If we gradually decrease this magnetic field to 0, and then re-energize it in the opposite polarity, and at the same time do the same thing out of phase with this one, the magnet will rotate and line up with this one, because this magnet is pushing it and this one's pulling it. Then this one is pushing it and this one's pulling it. Then this one's pushing it and this one's pulling it. And the magnet spins around. That's how you make a brushless DC motor, okay? If you take that magnet and put it in a tube, it still spins. If you put fins on it, like a jet ski rotor, then it becomes a pump. Now, that motor, just like that I just described, just like the motor you made, needs an axle running through it. You've got a bolt running through the hole in the magnet. Why do you need that bolt there?
To spin the magnet?
To spin the magnet and to keep the magnet right in the right place.
Yes.
If you let go of it, it would fall, or so it keeps it axisymmetric and holding it in space. With our new magnetically levitated device, we create a magnetic field that holds the thing in space, so we don't need an axle. But you go, well, what's going to keep it from tilting? Well, not only do we have 12 instead of just 3 magnets, we have 12 magnets that are precessing to keep the thing spinning. We have another 3 magnets on the other side that are either pushing or pulling to keep the thing from tilting. And 10,000 times a second, literally 10,000 times a second, it says how far, so there are 3 magnets, U, V, and W. You know when you take a coil of wire around iron and put electricity through it, it becomes a magnet, right? Well, these are 3 really tight, beautifully wound magnets around iron, and each one is a magnet, U, V, and W. Do you know what eddy current sensors are? There's a solid state component, like all the little components in your Arduino, that as you move a magnet near it, it induces electricity in it. There's back EMF and eddy current sensors. And by how much electricity is induced in this little component, it not only knows how fast the magnet's moving, but it knows exactly how far away it is. When I say exactly, I mean down to the thousandth of a millimeter, down to the micrometer, okay? So these 3 magnets, U, V, and W, are constantly, 10,000 times a second, looking at how far the disk is from them. If it gets too close, they decrease the magnetic field. If it gets too far, they increase the magnetic field. So these 3 magnets are going to keep the thing absolutely non-tilted. If it starts to go too close, they turn off and it pulls away. They get too far, it pulls them back. If it starts to tilt, they use differential tug to keep it flat. So this spinning thing is just sitting there spinning in space. It's not touching anything. So what's the mechanical wear of a device like that? There's none. No 2 pieces are touching each other. It'll last forever. Yeah.
How long did it take you to make that?
See, I couldn't even begin to make that. But what I did is made that other thing and got in the public eye, and then all these brilliant scientists who are much smarter than me, they're like you guys, that were working on stuff came forward and said, hey, I'm working on this, I'm working on, and a lot of it was crap. I go, yeah, that's great. But some of it was really brilliant, and we took the best and the most brilliant, put them in a room together, and over the last 2 years have developed this. And I should say, doing work like that takes a lot of money. Guess where we got our money? Mattress Mac. You know, gallery furniture? He gave us several $1 million just because he thinks it's really cool work and wanted to support it. That's another thing that Houston has. Philanthropy. Great community support. So, if you ever see Mattress Mac, tell him, oh, we heard Billy come talk about the artificial heart that you're funding. All right? Well, good luck with your careers and all your projects. We just started walking around. I like to see what everybody's working on.